Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with Nami. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director of Nami, North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina. I am so glad y'all are here. Thursdays with Nami is our way of building conversations, building community around mental health, and talking to those unique voices in the community that kind of bring our mission to life. One of those is Sean Wellington. He is a Chapel Hill resident and host of the highly rated Suicide Noted, a podcast that went live in July of 2020. I love the description online, so I'm just going to read it. The primary goal of Suicide Noted is to help people feel less shitty and less alone. Gotta love that. Each year, millions of people around the world attempt to take their own lives, millions. And we almost never talk about it. On the podcast, Sean talks with suicide attempt survivors so we can hear their stories in their words. I can't think of a better way to honor Suicide Prevention / Awareness Month than to have this conversation with Sean. More recently, he's created a circle of support for alums of his podcast. It's a space where people can talk about suicide without being told, hey there, you don't want to talk about that because you might trigger someone else. And it's totally valid that other people could end up in a dark room if the conversation turns to suicide. On the other hand, if that's what I need to talk about, where would I go? So one option is a virtual support group created recently by Nami Wake County. I got to give this a plug while it's so on point. It's called Survivors of Suicide Attempts, or SOSA. And we're going to have that link in the chat books and on Facebook. You can also find it by Googling Survivors of Suicide Attempts, Nami NC. Another safe space for these conversations is talking to people like Sean, who will be telling us all about his work in just another moment. You're welcome. And as usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Partway through, we'll show a video of the week, and then we'll spend time answering questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience, live with Zoom and Facebook. Now, a word from our sponsors. Funding for Thursdays with Nami comes in part from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We truly do appreciate their guidance and their support. All right, without any further ado, welcome, Sean.
Hi, Peg. How are you?
I'm well. I'm glad to be here tonight.
Me too.
Yeah. So we always like to know the background of our guests. I've given some, but there's so much more to you. Tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. If you know me, I don't do nutshells very well, number one. But I'll try.
How about a nut tree?
Nut tree, sure. Given that, I'm not going to go back to like 19th century Europe. That's too much of a background.
That would be.
Yeah. New Yorker, been here for several years, mostly a teacher. And I've got involved with mental health stuff / advocacy, and what turned into a podcast. The podcast was a couple of years ago. I got involved several years before that. And I spend a lot of my time now doing those kinds of things relating to that podcast and having those conversations and other things that come with having a podcast, as well as something called Grit, which is an organization that helps people craft and tell stories, what I call stories that matter, even though I know that sounds very snobby. It's not what I mean by it. I mean these kinds of stories, the stuff we talk about on here tonight, that kind of thing.
That does not strike me as snobby. Of course, I'm a little bit mental health centric.
Right.
So
sure. I get it. You're an easy crowd in that respect for my stuff. That's why we're a good fit. That's my nut tree.
Amen. I like it.
That's the nut tree. If you want more, you'll do it in the Q&A. I got more to share.
Okay, very good. So what inspired you to start Suicide Noted? I know there's a compelling story there.
Yeah. I've never actually been able to answer that question quite how I would want to. You know, my best friend ended his life, but this is going back more than 2 decades. That was a sort of, in a way, like all right, this is a real thing.
Mm,
But it was some time later that I really started to struggle and started to, what I say, kind of taste the pain that he might have been in, even like a little bit. And when I got through that, and I didn't really get through it, I got through it then. And then, as many of probably people watching or listening know, it's sometimes not like you're done, it's over, but it's a battle.
mm,
Yeah, it's a battle. At least it is for me. Let me just keep it to first person here. And at some point, and it was shortly after COVID, I had been thinking of this idea because I had been listening to I like podcasts. I'm a podcast guy more than, let's say, like YouTube or even reading these days. I prefer the what I can hear. And I did have I was listening to mental health podcasts, and a lot of them are very, very good. But what I wanted was something more, just simply get rid of the middle person. And those middle people are very valuable. Sometimes they're called doctors or directors or assistant directors of important agencies. So I'm not throwing any shade there. I just wanted to hear what people had to say. And sometimes I got it. So I said, you know what? I've got this idea. I've been thinking about it. And maybe with COVID, I just had more, or felt like I had a little more time and space to
Sure.
learn some of the things you got to learn. And these days, it's much easier than it used to be. And I just said, I'm doing it. And I just started it. And from day one, I thought, in it. This is the work I should be doing.
mm.
That's it. I'm in my lane. So I'm staying in it.
I like that. It just resonated. It felt
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that makes
really
sense to me.
Yeah.
All right. So what motivates you to keep doing it and even expand the work?
Don't know if, I don't know if I would have necessarily needed anything per se to happen to keep doing it. But I do know when I've had these conversations, it is very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So that alone is the reason to keep doing it.
Mm,
But then I also, why do I keep using second person? Sean, well, sometimes I get emails, sometimes from the guests, sometimes from other people, and you realize the impact it's having just
mm,
from that. So if you didn't know it, you're clearly told, please keep doing this. There's not a lot of stuff out there like it. It's
mhm,
really helping. How can you not keep doing it? As long as I'm able to keep doing it,
mhm.
I gotta keep trying to do it. So I'm gonna,
Yeah,
yeah,
I definitely get that. Once in a while, we get comments at Nami that are
yeah.
very similar, and
Mm,
we do the work, and it resonates with us. It's comes from our heart, from our own story, from our spirit. But when someone tells you this class saved my life,
yep,
or it meant so much to me to hear my story in your words,
yeah,
there's just something very pure about that. Like it gets
yeah.
right down to the essence of who
Mhm.
who I am.
So pure. And that was one of the reasons I think it mattered so much to me, just to have these conversations with the people that are going through it without any sort of intermediary or even commentary, just me and them, me and that one
Yeah.
person talking. So I'm glad it's working. I'm glad it's helping people feel, as I have said in the description, hopefully a little less shitty, a little less alone. I'm good. If we get in that, I'm like, all right, I'm doing good work.
I just love that. I love that language. I love how real it is. And it speaks so much to where I'm at. I'll try to do the first person thing too.
Yeah, yeah,
When I need to hear that kind of story, when I'm in that space. Sure.
yeah,
Um, and it occurs to me as we're talking, it must be quite intimate. It is just you and one other person talking about one of the most intense experiences of their life.
yeah. So intimate in that respect. Yeah. I send
Mm,
them something. So chances are these days, and it was maybe a little different in the very beginning, they've heard the podcast. So they can decide, I trust this guy or I don't like this guy. So there's already like a starting point.
mhm,
And then we exchange emails and I send them some information. So by the time we get on, there's usually a decent like vibe
mhm,
going on. And by vibe, I mostly mean them feeling like I can trust this person. Because what I have learned is if they can't trust me or whoever they're talking to, whenever that is, particularly about these things, you're not getting to that conversation is probably not happening.
Mhm. Sure. Right. Why would it?
Why would it? I mean, a very logical thing to do would say, I don't trust you. We're not going to go there. So my whole thing tends to be building trust, legitimately, authentically, not some sort of nefarious, manipulative BS. And how do you do that is, I don't know. I'm not sure I have an answer, but it's being honest with my own life
Mhm.
and listening as well as I can,
Mhm.
and not trying not to do the things that I think are not helpful or useful or kind or so forth. Yeah. And I make mistakes, man. I screw up, but I have found people are exceptionally forgiving when you just say, my bad, I screwed up.
Mm.
You have a little awareness of it. 9 times out of 10, it's no worries.
Mhm.
Once in a
Mhm.
while. Okay. But I mean, we're human. We make mistakes. It happens all the time.
Right. Well, yeah, I've definitely been there too.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I've seen enough of your work. You do have a style that's transparent and just conveys a lot of awareness about the other person's headspace and how you might be
Mm,
impacting it.
yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my perspective. So how does it affect your mental health to hear so many stories of people attempting to end their lives?
I feel like I want to say, or people expect me to say, it's challenging and I've got to create time and space for myself to not be in there, but I don't feel that way.
Hmm. That's good.
I, from a lot of my life, felt very disconnected and felt like the work I was doing didn't matter. Essentially, like I wasn't needed at all. It's not a
Mm,
good feeling. That's
no.
not a good feeling. So now I'm doing this thing, and I can't say exactly why. I can be kind of removed in a way that I think is good so that I don't get too affected, but also close enough that we can have that trust and have those conversations. I don't know what you'd call that space, but it feels like I'm in it.
Hmm.
I think it's a good space to be in for this kind of work. Don't know if it'll last.
Hmm.
I hope it does. I
Hmm.
seem to be able to hear them and be okay with it. And if I had 3 in a row, I would be okay with it.
Hmm. I like that answer. It occurs to me as someone who has mental health challenges and has been in some dark places, it's kind of a relief to
Mhm,
have that permission to have
mhm.
the dark conversation.
Oh
So,
man. I think yes. This could go on for 4 hours if I get started on this. So I'm going to keep it to 12 seconds, but I think that is one of the great problems with our culture
mhm,
and probably other cultures. We're not willing to have the, for lack of a better word, dark conversations. I
mhm.
went over 12 seconds, but let me just add this one thing.
Please.
The dark to me is not at all these conversations.
Mhm,
Dark to me is feeling this way and having no one to talk to. That
mm,
is darkness. That is what is one reason why people harm themselves.
mhm,
Not the only reason, but I know what I can do, and that's listen. I can't do anything else. I don't think. If I can, I would.
mhm.
So that's not darkness. That's real. That's human. Listen, share.
Beautiful answer. There is a fact that I read recently preparing for one of these webinars that social isolation is a big risk factor for suicide. So that squares with
Ah,
what you're saying very well. Yeah, I guess when I say dark conversation, I mean relative to the societally expected range of topics that is acceptable.
right.
Yeah.
And right. I don't know where that, yeah, I don't know where we figure out what's acceptable. I guess in our lives we figure it out. You can just tell.
Yeah. Trial
Um,
and error is my big game.
and that might be sufficient for the majority of people, but that's not my audience. My audience, I mean, that's not who I'm helping, serving, supporting, connecting with. Good, go have those conversations. There are parts of my life when I'm doing what I'm doing, I have non-dark conversations. It's not all the time,
Sure.
always. What about people who want to have those conversations and need to have those conversations? You got to serve them. And I would
Mm,
argue I don't know if they matter more, but maybe the stakes are a little higher in some ways.
mhm. Yeah. I
So,
really like this conversation from Gail, our volunteer psychiatric
yeah,
nurse, chat boxer. We need more dark conversations with people who listen and that we trust.
hell yeah.
Yeah, nice summary. Thank you, Gail. Um,
What percentage of the people, I wonder, and if Gail's a psychiatric nurse, her fist might clench right now. So this is not directed at you or anybody in any profession. But I just wonder how many people we talk to, whether they're professionals or people in our lives, that we don't entirely trust.
mhm,
I think that number is pretty high.
mhm.
I don't have a solution here. I'm just,
Right.
I can know for
Um,
me, like I trust you when I go to my therapist and he says I need to go to the hospital. I get it. He's following certain protocols and there's reasons, bigger conversation, but I don't trust you as much right now. When I talk to a friend and they do this or that and I leave feeling worse, I don't trust you as much anymore.
hmm,
Maybe I'm a super sensitive guy, but it just seems hard to find. And I imagine there are others that feel that way,
mhm.
you know?
Well, your starting point here was the clinical community, and I think it's hard to trust someone when you're in crisis. You go for help and you're talking to them strictly in clinical terms, and it's kind of a relationship in a vacuum where you don't
Yeah,
get to learn anything about them.
that is true too. Right?
So that
There's also something about, there's a beauty almost in knowing that if you're talking to somebody and there are legitimately nothing, what's the word here? Like there's nothing attached to it.
nothing
If
at
you're in a
stake.
if you're in a clinical setting, there's something attached to it. That's probably a good thing. That's why they're there in part, to get you certain kind of help. And we need that. I
Mm,
think we really lack, and I might be wrong here, but again, everything's just my own little world. I feel like we lack people who don't have any vested interest or any other motive or nothing attached. The only thing is just listening. Do we have those people? What are they called?
I think they're called peer supporters.
Okay.
People. Uh, that's my that's what my mind goes to hearing you say that.
Peer
And if
support. Yeah.
yeah, folks with lived experience of mental health challenges, substance use disorder, trauma, they can get training and become someone who leads a support group or learns how to walk that recovery road with someone else because they've been there and that person needs a guide.
I agree. I think also this might be an unpopular sentiment, but you'll hear a little bit of that from me. It's fine. I don't have lived experience with everything, right? Obviously. I can show empathy though.
Mhm.
That's not the same thing. And there is a massive amount of value in a peer support specialist who has the lived experience. It's different. But if you haven't gone through something, you can still show empathy. You can still listen. That to me,
Mhm.
yeah. Do we have spaces for people to do it one-on-one, a peer support specialist, but not a group? Because one-on-one, you can get much more intimate and just
Mhm.
more time. Do those exist? It'd be a
I
cool,
believe they do.
yeah.
Yeah, I believe they do. I would call the Nami, North Carolina helpline. Our helpline manager has a Bible-sized book of
All
resources,
right.
and can tell folks what's available in their area,
Good.
especially if they have no insurance or are on Medicaid. Interesting comment that's come through
Mhm.
regarding societal issues. What about those people who may recognize your issues but just think you're weak? Go home and cry to mama. We got a lot of work to do
Yeah.
busting stigma.
Hell yeah, we do. Yeah. I mean, I think the question becomes how do you bust stigma? How do
Mhm.
you bust stigma? Things like this, right? But isn't it to some degree a sort of echo chamber? We've had this conversation before where anyone who's here probably already gets it.
Mm.
I'm glad you're here, by the way. You don't see my you all, if you know me at all, you know I don't usually wear nice long sleeve shirts. I did this for you. I'm uncomfortable right now. I'm uncomfortable in these long sleeve silly shirts. How do you get it across to the person? And I don't know who left that comment about or asked that question about somebody who says you're weak. Is there a bridge to build there, or is it just I'm going to spend my time trying to help out or talk with other people? Because
Yeah.
that person, they're not going to get it. I don't know. Am I being too pessimistic here?
My reaction is very similar, that part of recovery is finding a family of choice, finding a circle of friends who get you and speak your language,
Yeah.
hopefully a language of recovery,
Yeah.
and won't have that reaction because they are more educated.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yes. In the support groups that I've done over the years, that's a theme that's come up a lot is, my family of origin or the friends I grew up with, they don't get it. They can't
Mhm.
make these changes with me. They just don't have the capacity or the will or something. So
Something, right.
yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
Can I find for me that yes, there are people that just they don't get it. There's actually more people who you would think would get it. And I actually know they mean well, but the
Mhm,
conversations aren't working still.
mhm.
Don't know what the block is. Don't know why. That to me is in a way almost more kind of insidious. Like we can recognize the person who's just going to say that thing and you're like, okay, bye.
Mm,
But when there are people that kind of mean well and but you keep doing that thing and it's not helping, it's actually really hard for me to talk to you when you do that thing. Eventually you stop trying to educate, right?
right.
Want to educate, but then are you crossing the line with, look, you don't have to tell me interpersonal communications here. I get that
Mhm.
too. So I don't know.
That's always a good question. Is it because you want to bust the stigma and educate people? I mean, for me, it's part of my job, but in
Yeah,
my personal life, how much energy do I have to educate the people
exactly.
around me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Not that much.
Not that much. And I've had this recently where I shared someone who's I'm pretty close with. They actually asked me what I need. I told them, and then they're going back to the things that aren't what I need. They've got
Hmm,
their sort of defaults. They're human, they're busy. But
hmm.
now I'm like, you know what? We've had that conversation a few times. For whatever reason, it doesn't seem like you can sort of embrace it or apply it. I don't think I'm going to do have that with you anymore. And I know there's going to come a point where it's going to be awkward because I'm going to say, I don't want to do that.
Hmm.
But what I'd have to,
Do you have to?
yeah, or I can fake things forever and then be super barely a real relationship. So right, I have a choice. I don't have to.
Well, I hear what you're saying. So the question is, can you be authentic? Or
No,
yeah.
correct. No, I cannot.
Oh,
And I feel like they might not be aware of that, but they might. Maybe that's them saying, maybe I'm just speculating. Maybe
mm.
that's them saying, I want a version of you, Sean, that I can deal with and tolerate. And the other stuff,
Oh,
you know what? Sorry you're going through that. And they mean it.
yeah.
Get a different kind of help, get different type of people. I'm not your person for that. But they're just not saying it. So I'm trying to piece it together. That may be what's going on. All right.
For me, what that brings up is I'm someone who presents well. I can do public speaking. I can do,
Mhm.
so people want to see the peg that's on the podcast. They want to see that person. Well, when I go home and
Mm,
relax, she's gone. She's at work.
yeah. Right. We
It's
have these different personas and they're all real.
mhm.
I don't think one is necessarily any less authentic, but there's roles, no? There's versions, there's hats.
Right.
Do you feel
Right.
fake right now? Do you feel inauthentic right now?
No, this is one of my most authentic ways of being.
Yeah,
But I can't, there's a certain skill set, there's a certain effort and energy and focus that goes into this kind of conversation. And that for me to do that 24/7 would be completely exhausting.
sure. Sure. Nobody does it 24/7. Even you'll see in about 20 minutes, even 1 hour with me is very exhausting. We're not there yet. You might be starting to feel it. I understand. What I'm saying is when you go home, when I go home, like, you throw your shoes off, whatever you do, like you're different, but those are equally, I think, authentic selves. Both valid,
Absolutely.
but they're not the same.
Right. I guess another way of saying it is that, there's me when my battery is charged, and there's
Wow.
me when I need to decompress and avoid stimulation. And that's a pretty different experience to the other human involved.
Yes, for sure. But I'm sure you have found I'm doing it again. I have found there is a degree of pressure, and we get it all the time of smile, present. They don't, no one usually says it quite that way.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Feels
maybe
that way.
Well, it's not just in my imagination. There are certain social expectations, mores, or whatever they're called. You got to present in a not in exactly one kind of way, but there's a spectrum or certain things that are more acceptable. And if you're frowning a lot, or you're being a quote Debbie Downer, well, that's not cool.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's value to that in the larger social landscape and glue that makes a society work. I kind of think you're all a bit Pollyanna for this guy, and I'm going to go to another place right now. Have a good day. Is that a pejorative word? Maybe it is Pollyanna. I heard it a lot lately, so I'm using it.
I think it fit the sentence very well. You want to be in a space where people can be real, where we have permission to be real. And I'm so grateful. My boss put a note in the chat that I appreciate Peg, however she shows up, I care about Peg, however she shows up at any moment. Like, to have a boss actually say that, who actually acts that way in the moment. That's amazing. Awesome. I'm very grateful. Thank you, Gary.
Gary's the boss.
He is. He's the executive director.
All right, Gary. Yeah. You seem like a cool boss. I wish I had more bosses like Gary in the past.
So did I.
Right. It's hard to find. Yeah. I would imagine Nami NC, you've got to have some good people doing that work, because you couldn't do it without it. You just wouldn't be able to do it.
I'm very comfortable and happy with our team right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right.
Can I add one other thought to that thread?
Please.
For me, when people allow me to be frowny, the irony is when you allow me to do that, I can get up and be okay and be smiley, but I have the space not to be. But when it's feeling forced, I can't function very well in that space. That might be just me, but that's the irony of it, is if you give me that space to be wherever I am. And look, I know I used to teach, right? I used to teach in classrooms. You can't go into a classroom and for an hour just be angry or frowny. It's probably, and that might be fair to say, it's not going to work. I get it. But when it is applicable, you let me have that space. And oftentimes I'll be cool. I'll be like, all right, this is how I feel. And my energy goes up a little bit. My upside down gets my frown. You know what I want to say?
Turned upside down.
You know what I want to say? But somehow I'm less frowny. I'm not going to say smiley, Peg, okay? But I'm a little less frowny.
Okay.
Maybe smiley sometimes.
I will not advocate for the smiley. But I do like the frown upside down. I feel the same way, that the minute I'm allowed to not be okay, like, well, I'm okay now. Like,
right.
Yeah.
It's called amazing. Space. I don't know if people use that word, like holding space. There's something about creating that space that lets people kind of breathe, like literally or metaphorically. It's so valuable, and it's really rare.
It is. That typically what I feel is some kind of pressure to be two-dimensional. And I guess, creating space is a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Like a cartoon character is two-dimensional, or is that three? No,
that's two.
That's two. We don't want that.
Oh, it's called Unconditional Love.
Oh, it's got a name. Wow.
Nice. Thank you, Gary, for that comment. Unconditional love. All right. Lots of really awesome comments in the chat box. Thanks everyone for contributing to this. I'm appreciating the conversation about honesty in real relationships. From Melissa, and Tyler made a cool comment as well. All right. Thanks everyone for being authentic with us and vulnerable.
Yes.
Okay. Where can people find your podcast and all your other cool programs?
Now we're getting into my web presence, which gives me a lot of agita. Because agita, do you know what agita is?
I do not.
Oh, agita, that might be Yiddish. That might be Yiddish.
How'd you die?
I'm Jewish. Jews know some Yiddish almost always. It might not be Yiddish. And Ajit is just like stress.
Okay.
Because I struggle with that component of this whole thing. So the best and most direct way to find the Suicide Noted podcast is wherever you listen to podcasts, just type in Suicide Noted. It'll come up. There's a myriad ways that you can, if you know podcasts, it's what Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, it should be there. All the grit stuff, which is more closely related to like story, personal narrative story, is going under some maintenance. So right now, I can put some links in. Facebook is probably the best way. The website we had is down, and hopefully one will be up within a week or two. But when you're a solo show doing it all yourself, I got to tell you, it is hard.
A lot of work.
Yeah, and skills that you don't care about and don't want to learn. You got to figure it out. Nobody's giving me any pity. I understand. Not asking for that. I'm just saying, yeah. So, but yes, at some point, whether it's here or elsewhere, we can share links that helps people direct if they want to learn more.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
I know we have a link that we can share for your event coming up September 11th.
Yes.
Can I talk about that?
Yes. Yes. You have a link for that?
Yeah, I shared it with our chat helpers before the show.
Cool. Are we able to also share your and Nami NC's role in this?
We can. Sure.
I mean, I just want to shout out that you're helping with this event. You can add the details if you want to. I'd love to hear them again. So the idea is I have had the Suicide Noted podcast since July of 2020. I have been doing this personal narrative story thing since slightly before then. Actually, considerably before then, but really diving in when we locked down or shortly before. So my goal has always been to bring those worlds together. One of the things I've been doing before they really started to come together, like 2020, 2021, I had a curated storytelling show called 7 by 7 with certain themes, and the themes are all often around mental health. An ongoing open mic for any storyteller. You don't have to, you just come and tell your story, called the Mental Health Happiest Hour. So that's always been my thing. But now is the first time of all days on 9/11. Probably not the best choice, but it's fine. It is what it is.
It works.
Yeah. Where we're specifically helping storytellers craft and tell a story from their experience related to their suicide attempt, and bringing it together. And on the 11th at 8 p.m. Eastern, we have got, I believe, 7 storytellers. There's been a little movement with that, but we should have 7 storytellers. And some of them have a background. All of them are attempt survivors. Some of them have a background in storytelling and have been doing it for some time. Others, we've had to work with some, but regardless, they're all powerful. They're all survivors. The fact that they're willing to get in front of a group of people, some of whom they don't even know, is beyond admirable, I think. And the stories are done and crafted and told in a way that are, the goal being that you really want to listen and pay attention and compelling and maybe even relatable, which is hard to do, the craft of it. But that's the goal, because I want people to hear these stories done in a way, because I've been around the mental health space for a while, and storytelling for quite a while now has been almost like a buzzword. And I hear, and this is where I'll get snobby, admittedly, I hear a lot of courage, not a lot of craft. And it matters, because I feel if you are willing to share your story, it doesn't mean people are going to always listen from beginning to end. And there's things you can do so that it raises the likelihood that people really pay attention. That's what I want, because I assume if you're telling your story to a group of people, you want them to be listening throughout. The assumption that people automatically are, I think, is a false one.
Yeah, I would love to learn that someday. I feel like I'm good at one-liners. I'm good at certain kinds of conversations, but like a whole story with a beginning, middle, and an end, that's a lot. It
is. There's a craft to it. I think people find wow, this is a craft. Like, it takes work, but also you can do it. And I'm not the guy who says everybody can be an amazing public speaker and everybody can dunk a basketball if they practice. It's just not true. It's just not. I mean, there's just facts, but a lot of it, I think, comes down to people not quite knowing what it is, like what a story actually is. We use that term to describe so many things. Once they understand it and some of the components and things that work, you could apply it. You
Mhm,
can, you will get better. So that's
mhm.
kind of fun to see, especially with these stories.
Yeah.
It's really
Well, I'll
cool.
put that on my bucket list.
Yes. Don't wait too long. I mean, I know you're young, but we don't have infinity. You know what I'm saying?
I
As
definitely
far
know it.
as far as my beliefs, we don't. Others might disagree.
Gotcha. I'm 54, so I don't feel like
All
I
right.
have forever. Um, all right. So, oh, I know what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Did you ever have a situation where someone was telling a mental health story and they got very distressed, or it just
Yeah.
became extremely intense?
That's a great question. My answer would be not often,
Hmm.
because people know typically we say do your best to tell from a scar and not a wound
Right.
if you can. Now, what people often or sometimes find is once they're actually telling it, maybe it's the first time, oh, this is still a wound,
Got
but
it.
they didn't know it until they were in front of people, right? So it's happened, not often, and it's tough. It's a tough situation to handle. For me, and this might sound a little bit self-congratulatory. It's not meant to be. If somebody's you stop the show, right? I mean, you don't necessarily cancel it, but they're going through something. At that point, I don't frankly care about the audience.
Right.
Let's
Right.
just make sure you're cool. It actually happened with a storyteller who's going to be there Sunday. And she told a story at one of my events. Uh, and it's the first time she had talked about her suicide in this context. And
Wow.
she was, there was a lip quivering, eyes were getting wet, a little bit shaky, and you could tell. And I was like, oof, how do I handle this? And I thought, not only do I or others involved owe it to her to kind of just chill and say, breathe or whatever. I mean, we're good. Um, this is going to sound weird. It's a moment to model.
Hmm. Teachable moment.
Maybe that's not the right word, but kind of. Yeah, a little bit. A little bit.
I think it's really important when that happens to kind of lean in.
Yes.
And
This is the stuff.
yeah, that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. Exactly.
Hmm.
It's not just to have amazing stories of, oh my God, that's cool.
Hmm.
I'm moved. That great. But to get so far ahead, especially with these kinds of stories that you can plan how everything's going to go, you want to do that as somebody who's like producing it or hosting. You want that. But when that opportunity is there, not opportunity, when that happens, keep it real.
Hmm.
Who's going to be upset with that? I mean, if I were worried about what people thought, and I really am not. If you have a problem with that we're not a good fit. Just there are other shows to check out.
Right. Right.
You were not going to work out. You're eventually going to dislike me for something else. So just go do something else now. We're good. I don't want you to feel that way. I don't think, well, I guess if someone feels that way, they wouldn't tell me, but no one's ever said that to me.
Mm.
But I'm pretty clear on what's up. I'm pretty clear on like why we're doing this and no apologies.
Hmm. Hmm.
None. Yeah. That's a good question, Peg.
It just kind of hit me. Someone who's been in a lot of support groups and led some support groups. It's an intense situation, but it's also an opportunity to really give that person a gift by accepting that moment and embracing that moment and just letting it be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because so often people react out of fear, or there's some kind of wall put up, or a message of rejection,
Yeah.
which is the opposite of what the person needs.
Yeah. It's a tricky balance when it
Mhm.
happens because for me, right, there might be 3 or 4 storytellers waiting to tell.
Right.
Maybe it's a free event. Maybe there's a ticket that someone paid a few bucks for. Got to keep that in mind.
Mm.
You don't have to, but it's part of my inner monologue of like, okay. But my point earlier was just in that moment for sure what takes my attention and press it. And that's what I'm thinking about. Now, if that goes on for 20 minutes, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
What do? I don't know. I haven't been in that situation. I'd like to believe I would do the right thing, though.
I feel that you would. That's my heart. My gut tells me that.
Yeah. Especially if I'm wearing this shirt. I feel like this shirt is doing good things for me. It's burgundy. Can you tell?
I support that. It looks purple on my screen.
Oh, it's a little purpley burgundy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it and I don't like it. So we don't have to talk about that, but I brought it up anyway.
Well, sometimes you need a lighter diversion. Gary wants to get you a Nami shirt.
Oh, well, I'm going to give you my address, Gary.
Okay.
Get a Nami shirt out of this? That's sweet.
Don't tell our other guests. That's not a normal perk. Okay.
Do you have the shirt that's between I used to be a medium, but now I'm kind of a large, but mainly just because I'm getting older. And you know how the body changes a little bit? That shirt size, if you have that shirt size, that's perfect.
Well, that's what we all wear. We'll get you one.
Okay. Fantastic.
All right. So tell us about your community of survivors. Anything else that they're up to?
So the idea with the community was to invite, at least the starting point was invite the guests to a space where there could be a more ongoing conversation. I actually emailed just about all of my guests. A couple people's emails were delinquent. There's one person I'm pretty sure is no longer with us. Yeah. And some of them accepted and some of them didn't, right? Life goes on, they're busy. It's not a good fit. So I have about 50 people right now, 50 survivors right now. It's on a platform called Circle. I'm not trying to give them, not plugging them. It just happens to be there. But there were reasons why I didn't want to do it on something like Facebook or, and it's interesting. I actually am having what I've learned is I'm actually not always sure that suicide attempt survivors want to be hanging out with suicide attempt survivors all the time.
Sure.
That is an understandable. So I was like, all right, I'm gauging that, but it's a space for people to talk. We have some events like this, different kinds of events. A few of them are certified peer support specialists. So we might be getting some of that going. Obviously got to be led by somebody who's been trained.
Mm-hmm.
Other kinds of meetings where we just have conversations,
you
know, and there's a forum kind of thing you're probably familiar with. It's been interesting. I'm learning. It's been going on for 2-3 months and we'll see where it goes. I don't know. We'll see where it goes. Yeah.
Neat. It's a neat development, neat community from the sounds of it.
Yeah. Trying.
All right. So I think we're going to wrap up the interview portion of the show. We're almost at the halfway point. Is there anything you want to say that you haven't been asked about yet?
I asked that question on my podcast. I think it's a great question, but now that I've been asked it, I'm like, whoa, I got to think about all that. I would say no. It'll come up. It's already come up because that's what's meant to be, or it'll come up in the Q&A.
Okay. That definitely works for me. So before we go to our video of the week, I want to thank all of our helpers who are working behind the scenes. We've got App State social work intern Caitlin Rita, executive director Gary Kreitz, and psychiatric nurse Gail Pruitt. Thanks all of you for all that you do. And of course, thanks to Sean so very much for spending your evening with us. All right, so our video of the week is just all about Nami. I figured we'd go back to the basics. And let's check this out.
Each year, 1 in 5 U.S. adults experience mental illness, and 17% of youth ages 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder.
I joined NAMI because I have 2 sons that live with a mental illness, and I didn't want any other families to feel alone like I did.
At NAMI, the first thing we want anyone to know is you are not alone in your mental health journey.
I just really want to talk about so people know that you don't have to go through it alone.
NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization, dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness. We started as 2 moms, gathered around a kitchen table in 1979. And today, we are an alliance of more than 600 local affiliates and 48 state organizations who work in your community to raise awareness, build advocacy, and provide support and education. Nami envisions a world where all people affected by mental illness live healthy, fulfilling lives supported by a community that cares. Every year we are expanding, no matter race, religion, age, or sexual identity. We are people with lived experience, families and loved ones, survivors and advocates, and together, we will fight the stigma surrounding mental health and create a better world for the sake of all of us. We have resources for you and can't wait to become an extension of your family. We are here for a healthier world. We are here for better mental health. We are here for each other. Join us.
All right, that's us in a nutshell, Nami. I think they need more dogs and horses, but otherwise it's a fine video. Okay.
Very good video.
Yeah, so now we'll be taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience on Facebook Live and Zoom. We'll answer as many questions as we can. We'll go until the energy seems to dissipate. Sometimes that happens at 8, sometimes 8:30. All right, first up from Gary. Perhaps this is an odd question, he says, but how can we best celebrate and honor the life of someone who has died by suicide?
Is that directed to me?
It sure is.
Gary doesn't play softball. Gary's in for like the high heat, high and inside, 93-mile-an-hour fastball, brushing me off the plate. Man, I don't know if I can answer that. I can only tell you how I tried to honor my friend, but I was also much younger. I had hair. I spent time, I spent time with his friends and family. I was able to do that. I kept his memory alive for me in some ways as best I could. But when you're young, it's interesting, your life, not always, again, it's just me, your life kind of goes on.
Mhm.
Survival.
Mhm.
So as I look back and I think, that was interesting. I kind of got on with things rather quickly.
Mhm.
I didn't beat myself up over it. I just sort of thought that's what it was. That's what I did. Can I answer that how I answered it and then give that some more thought? Because it's a really good question.
Of course. And if I could share an observation, Sean, I think our first reaction is to do what we need to do to survive. But as I recall, did you start Suicide Noted on the 20th anniversary of that death?
I actually no, the 20th anniversary was when the 20th anniversary was approaching, and it was like a few months out, I decided to write a play. Oh, I have some theater background, and so I decided to put on a craft and perform a solo show, and I did that in Durham and in Boone because they had a festival.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that was one way. That was one way, actually. Thank you for reminding me of that. And then and then the podcast. So those things are in large part to him and his life and death. Yeah.
Yeah. I recently wrote a blog in honor of a friend who completed suicide in 2016. And it was difficult, but it also felt like it helped me to remember all the beautiful parts and all the beautiful moments that we had, and honor him in that way by sharing that picture of who he was and all his special little qualities. He was a unique individual. So I think whatever works for you is a good way to honor your friend.
Yeah, and I think it matters how you feel about the way they died. Because if you look at it as, and I'm being sort of black and white here, and it's rarely that way, but if you look at it as selfish, that might affect how you sort of deal with it. I never did. And maybe that's one reason I'm here today doing the podcast, because I was never the guy ever who thought of it that way. I just, in my mind, was always, part of it was there might have been something undiagnosed or misdiagnosed.
Right.
Part of it was he was a New York City police officer. And at that time, they weren't far away, but at that time, there was very little to no resources available. And if you did take advantage of them, they knew it.
Ooh,
So it's not really, you're asking someone to choose between their livelihood. That's not a real fair thing to do.
oh, right.
But the biggest thing for me, in addition to those, was he was in a massive amount of pain.
Right.
That's typically why people make that choice. So that's why they do that. They're in pain. And I never thought, well, other people were in pain. So if they're in pain and didn't do that, no, no, that's no.
Yeah. I think the
That's not how
best,
pain works.
exactly. Oh, it's interesting you say that. One comment that helped me understand suicide before I had my own experience to refer to
Yeah,
was if your hand was stuck in a furnace, would you want to pull it out?
it's a great
Uh,
one. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that made it clear. So the next comment is from Tyler, and he would like to be part of your podcast, Sean. He's a survivor and has been recovering gratefully since 2020.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So I'd be happy to connect the two of you. I think
Of
that could be
course,
a
Tyler.
wonderful
Yeah.
fit.
Connect us. And Tyler, I appreciate you trusting me to have that conversation. Connect us up and we'll get the ball rolling. We'll have you on. Thanks, man.
Yeah, and Tyler's going to be our guest in the near future too. So I don't
Oh,
want to share too many details.
okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
but thank you, Tyler, for being such an awesome spokesman and for your courage.
Definitely.
All right, question from Jackie. They say that men are more likely to complete suicide, whereas women are more likely to attempt it. Any observations or comments on that?
The fact that I think that's fact, what she's saying. That's research
Yes.
data shows fact.
Mhm.
Why that is, I'd be just speculating because I want to remind everyone here, I do some research, but 90% of my work are these conversations. So
Mhm.
that is a rather narrow sort of scope. It's, I think, a super effective and powerful scope, but it's not, there might be many, there's probably many people out there have a sort of a broader understanding of the question you're asking. In my experience, why do men? Two reasons come to mind. One, we don't give men typically quite as much space to be vulnerable, to share their feelings.
Right.
Well, actually, there's two more. Access to guns. Now, why men buy guns more than women? I don't know for sure, but guns are dangerous and guns are typically rather effective.
Yes.
So the completion rate is going to be higher.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm zigzagging here a little bit, but because the question was, why do women try more and why do men succeed more? Succeed is not the best choice of words, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I kind of zigzagged around and that didn't make a lot of sense.
No, I think it did.
I don't know why are men's rates higher? I think part of it definitely is method.
That's what I was taught, that they're more likely to use firearms, like you said.
And women, and this is based on and I've had about 150 conversations for context. So that's not thousands, but it's not nothing.
Yeah.
The method that seems by far the most common for women is pills.
Okay.
And so they just don't work very well. And that's not the best way to frame it, but at the time they wanted them to work and do something and that didn't happen. And yeah, I don't know. There's probably much more to it than method. That are men when they get to the point of trying more like I'm not playing here.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a part of that. I don't know. I tend to think not, but it's possible.
I know
What do
there's some folks who just have a position of, if this is what I intend to do, I'm not going to discuss it with anybody. I'm not going to
Oh,
answer
yeah.
the typical questions. I'm going to do it.
That's a thought. I don't know if I totally agree, but you're saying no. If you're really ready to do this, you do it.
Well, I've met people where they took that, where that's what they said. That was what they said.
And if you talk about it, that probably means it's a quote unquote cry for help, which is a weird way to frame it, but they need some help. They're asking for
Right.
some help. They're asking for something. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think research has been done in that area. I don't feel qualified to add more. I agree
Right.
with what you've said.
It's just such a tricky subject to research, though, isn't it? Because there's so much hush hush.
It
People are
is.
not going to be super straightforward typically. Some will, but, and I'm sure the researchers, if they're good, understand those things and do what they have to do to try to make the data work.
Right.
But we know, for example, like we know the numbers are higher. So you almost, this is my experience, but I've read a fair amount, rarely are the numbers under. So if we say in the United States, 1 million people try to take their own lives every year, it's not going to be less than that. It's only going to be more than that in
Right.
reality, because there are people that are doing things on the road and they're driving their car. It's a quasi suicide attempt, but it doesn't get
Right.
labeled as that. That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of very few, if any, situations where we label it a suicide and actually wasn't.
Right.
So the numbers are even higher and they're already so high.
I agree. It's definitely
incredible.
underreported. Yeah.
I'm still just astounded. There are places like tonight, like what I do, and other places, many other places that talk about it, but given the numbers and what's on the line, it is weird to me that
Right.
it's so hard for people to talk about it. I don't get it. Help me understand.
Right. And in particular, why are we not talking about it more in middle school and high school where the rates are increasing dramatically? It's a public health issue and it's huge.
Well, this gets back to how we talk about it, right? So I think in my experience, I have heard people talking about it, but the way it's being spoken of is, I don't think, always the most effective way. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, by the way, but I'm going to say what I want to say, and I hope it's okay.
I support that.
If the message is only get help, don't do it, I understand the sentiment of that. And I'm not suggesting people don't get help.
Sure.
Or I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to do it. But if that's kind of where it ends, and we don't have a space for people to talk legitimately safely about it, I don't know. It doesn't ever, that never felt completely on point to me. It felt like it was missing at least one big step. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that was just the presentation, and actually there was more to it, but.
Yeah, there has to be, you have to meet people in a way that addresses the emotional need that makes them want to do that. If you're not addressing the pain, the underlying trauma, mental illness, whatever it is, how can you possibly be effective?
I mean, sometimes I think it's the limits of like making a presentation to a group, because this is such personal stuff.
Yeah.
That unless you know personal stuff, a generalized sort of do this, do that, think about, it's going to be tough. That's a challenge. But I'm just not a fan of it, but I know there's value. I know that there's a lot of groups that promote, they have fancy, cute acronyms, which are great. Acronyms make it easy to remember. I know. I'm sure NAMI's an acronym. Acronyms are all the rage. They're good. You said it was SOSA, NAMI. We already have 2. I love it.
And we were founded by Nami mommies. Yeah.
Oh, Nami mommy. Oh, it's brilliant. Yeah. No, it is. But so some of the stuff I've seen by a large, not NAMI, a large organization, I think deals primarily with colleges, is an acronym. It's like something, the end is always refer.
I'm sorry?
Oh, the end of the acronym, there's something about you. I don't know the first letter, then it's validate, and then it's refer. But the validate doesn't get much attention there. The one that gets the most attention is the refer. And again, I'm not saying not to suggest someone get that kind of help, because that's often what they need as a starting point or but that V part, the validating or not invalidating, that's a huge part.
Right.
Oh, Gary's saying validate. Right. And so, Gary, I think when a lot of people see that, it becomes almost not a formula, and it's better than not doing it. I just want more time to be spent on how to legitimately validate someone without it being someone bit of a platitude or formulaic, or that communication is a fascinating thing, and people know when you're BSing them. They also know when
They
you
sure
mean
do.
well. And so if you're keeping it real, people will give you latitude that you don't get the words perfectly. And if you're BSing them and you get the words perfectly, it ain't going to fly. Might there
Right.
be an exception with a kid out there who's 13 and needs to hear? Sure. But by and large, no. And then we don't spend a lot of time in all the ways we inadvertently invalidate. Say that 5 times fast. And a lot of us do it, and we don't. And so maybe that particular VAR, that they had a different goal in mind. So I don't mean to pick on them, because I'm sure they're doing great work, legitimately.
Mm,
I want to spend more time in that. So, look, what I do with the podcast is spending a lot more time in the V and a little bit in the A, and not the R.
mhm.
But I'm weird.
I like that. I think that the V is missing in so many conversations and in so many lives.
Yes. Yeah, constantly,
Right.
all the time. And the conversations that we're having about someone's who in deep pain, one of the reasons is that how did they get there? Myriad reasons, but I'm pretty sure for many of them, they didn't get the validating legitimately.
Right.
So one of the places they end up, I end up, maybe you end up, one of them not only is,
Mhm.
I'm thinking about something pretty bad right now.
Right.
Well, it started 25 years ago or whatever.
Mm,
And
right.
and so we don't do it well. How do we not? How are we not teaching this in schools? I do not understand how this isn't a subject on par with, on equal footing with any other subject. Please explain to me like I'm a third grader.
There's no good explanation. I will mention Nami has a program where a young person shares their story of living with a mental health challenge,
Yes.
and it's presented some facts, but the emphasis is on that story, that young face and voice that they can connect with. I've been there too, which is sort of the classic Nami approach. And
Yeah, great. Love it.
that has been effective. It's hard to keep a team of young people active in doing it, because young folks are so active, and well, now I'm playing soccer and my schedule changed.
Yeah.
But it's an excellent presentation program. It's called Ending the Silence.
Nice.
We have many other good ones.
I know you do.
Well, thank you. So
I mean,
that's
not
the-
every state does what you're doing right here. You are more progressive than some other NAMI chapters, it looks like.
Well, I think that this podcast, this webinar has been a gift to me. We were just trying to come up with things. How can we give people a way to feel connected during COVID, when getting in together in person just wasn't a good idea for a while? And
Yeah. It's brilliant.
well, I'm grateful that Gary, is the kind of leader who creates the space that people can have a creative idea and feel like they can share it and suggest something without being a huge risk. And I knew I wouldn't be made to feel stupid even if it didn't work. So
Yeah, that's huge. And
yeah.
I also know he's the kind of guy that when he says he's going to give me a t-shirt, he's going to give me a t-shirt. I can just tell. Thanks in advance, Gary. I really appreciate it.
Let's keep our eye on the important things. The t-shirt. Yes, we'll get that done.
You don't have to, apples and oranges a little bit, but I do like oranges.
Okay. We'll make that happen. Fair is fair.
It's fine. Yes.
You were promised in front of witnesses, so okay.
Yeah.
We have a lull in the questions. I'm going to make some quick announcements, so type up those questions if you want to get them in before we close. Next week, join us to meet Dr. Sujaya. She's a psychiatric nursing instruction at NC State University. She does wonderful work with sharing culture. She's an Indian American and cooks amazing spicy foods for folks. She has wonderful stories to tell. You don't want to miss hearing her story. Losing a friend to suicide is part of what prompted her career choice. Please fill out our survey. When you leave the Zoom call, a survey will magically appear. Let us know how we did tonight. It helps us improve over time. And it keeps our esteem up. No, it helps us show our funders what we do and the value of it. So if you'd like us to fix something, that's a good way to tell us too. All right. Well, again, I'll ask you if you have any closing thoughts, closing comments, closing arguments.
While people might be asking one last question, can I ask whoever was doing, I apologize for not remembering names, the link to Sunday night show? I want you all there, please. If
Oh,
you feel like it's something you want to do and might be of value or benefit, or remember the main thing, less shitty, less alone, come. And by the way, there's a modest price for a ticket. There's also a pay what you can. And if you have a money issue at all, you reach out to me, you can come, please. Just don't even worry about it. Hang on, let's see. Thank you.
I got it.
I see a few links. Yes, that's the very long Eventbrite link. Yes. But again, I want to reiterate, because I have been there where even pay what you can was not really going to work. Just let me know. And I'm happy to send you the Zoom link. It's no big deal. So yeah, should be
You don't want to
interesting.
miss.
It's really hard to get people to come to Zoom. As you know, it's challenging to get people to come to virtual events more now than it was a year or even 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was like easy. But I do think that these stories matter. And I know I've got a crowd here that probably agrees.
Hmm.
If we're talking to like the National Association of Ant Farmers, that might be a tough, you're on board already. I don't know, like you're an easy crowd to say, hey, this would be a cool thing to check out or something you might like.
Of course. And you don't want to miss something called Personal Stories by Badass Survivors.
Guess who came up with that little tagline? This bald guy. That's who. I've been using badass in my vocab more lately. I don't know why, but it keeps coming up. Pollyanna badass. That's an interesting combination.
I don't think I
Opposites
like that
attract.
person.
No.
Here's a fun anonymous question. Someday, if you write an autobiography, what would you name it?
Well, first of all, I would probably have it ghostwritten because I don't like writing.
Okay.
But I would send them a lot of recordings. And what would I name it?
Sean noted.
Is it just if it's for a specific reason, like I'm writing this memoir or this autobiography, but it's really to promote, suicide noted or grit or something else, it would have probably a sort of, but if it's more general, here's what's gonna surprise you. I think it would be A Bird Sings in Sunnyside.
Say more about that.
Sure. When I was at my lowest, one of, if not my lowest point, I was staying with my sister and brother-in-law. I was living in New York City for many years. They lived on the edge of New York and in Nassau County, which is the next county on Long Island. I was in their basement, nice basement, had a lot of health problems, didn't have much hope, didn't have any answers. I'd go to sleep and wake up early. The sun would be coming through this little window and I'd hear the birds. And this sounds like it's like melodramatic, but it's not. Promise. And I'd hear the birds and say, shit, another day.
Oh.
And my brother-in-law at some point said, maybe they'll come. I actually am getting choked up, man. Oof. My brother-in-law said, I hope one day you can hear the birds and want to and enjoy that. Something like that. And sure enough, with their help and some time and some proper, like it turned out to be a lot, like an anxiety, because when I was eventually diagnosed, I wasn't even diagnosed. When I eventually got a anti-anxiety medication, I was able to start eating. I've learned then that when you don't eat for a long time, you don't just lose weight, your brain changes.
Right.
I was not functioning. So they got me these shakes that I could eat. Like, that's love, man. That's love. And eventually I was able to move out and I moved to a neighborhood in Queens called Sunnyside. And so you can see where the metaphor starts to take place between the birds and Sunnyside. And the birds started to have a little music to my ears. Now, was that a happily ever after? Yes and no. I mean, I recovered from that. Maybe this wouldn't be in that autobiography. I don't know. That might be another book. Birds sang, and then the bird stopped singing, and
It's beautiful.
it was powerful. The one of the greatest moments of my life was not long after that. When I moved to Sunnyside, I'd started working part-time at a school in the city, so it was a little bit of a commute. It's actually quite close. I was teaching English as a second language in Midtown. Came back, got off the train, went into a Starbucks, get my coffee. I'm standing in the middle of Starbucks. Like, do I get cream or where am I going? And nothing happened, but I felt good. And I had been feeling so bad for so long that it actually, not just emotionally, physically, emotionally, maybe even spiritually. And you won't hear me say stuff like that very often. I was like, this is as good as it gets. It just was incredible. And it didn't last long, but I just remember, wow, I held on to that because I think if you could feel this good getting coffee at Starbucks, just like a little thing, there's hope in there for me somewhere.
It's
That was
beautiful.
one of the more powerful moments of my life.
An uninvited moment of joy.
Oof. It was a joy. It was something. It was something. There's an interesting thing that happens, at least for me, when you're so down, is that when you're okay-ish again, it feels different. There's a different level of, I don't know if the word's appreciation, that doesn't feel quite right, but there's the difference of something.
Relief.
Which, yeah, maybe that's it. Just to not feel like total shit. And that might be a physical illness, a mental, both, other. Just to not feel like shit. And that's maybe one of the reasons why I came up with that little tagline of shitty and alone. It applied to me. So that would be what it is. Unless something as dramatic happens, then I'll change it to something else. Like Peg's idea is good. Sean noted seems a little Sean-centric. To be frank.
I love it does, but I love the bird story. I have a vaguely similar story when I was coming out of a very dark time. I didn't think I'd work again. I didn't think I'd have actual friends.
Oof,
and
yeah.
slowly that started to change. There was like the tide was turning. And at some point I realized just one day, like, I'm actually going to be okay again. And so I have a tattoo of a bird on my shoulder. It's a swallow with a forked tail. And the reason I chose that, other than I think they're cool, is that the sailors way back would be approaching land after weeks and weeks at sea, and they'd see the birds and they'd realize, I know I can't see home, but I know it's there and I'm almost there.
It was interesting. I don't feel like for me it was tangenting a little bit. It wasn't like a super clear moment, like, oh, the birds are really bad sounding. Oh my God, they're great. It wasn't. It was really a moment I caught myself not hating the sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, I caught it. I'm like, even if it was more like neutral, it still was a long way from where I was. Have you ever had that? It sounds like you may have, where just getting up is just dreadful.
I have. Yeah, I've had moments. Yeah, I've had times where I really just wanted to be in bed, and I'm going through the motions and I'm doing what I need to do to pay the bills and trying to figure out how to get myself to really want something, to want to live, to feel truly engaged instead of just doing what I need to do to survive.
Yeah. That's so important, right? The engagement, which I don't think social services can help out with that to some degree, but there's things they do that are really helpful. And I think actually they do a fair amount of that. But people feeling like they're connected and needed is so huge for their health. Like for me, a guy, and I'm middle-aged, I'm single. I missed the boat on a lot of things. And that might sound like, oh, well, you're still doing good things. I am, and I appreciate what I'm doing, and I'm proud of what I'm doing. But this actually might go back a little bit to the question about why men try. And it sure applies to women too, but there's pressure, at least from my experience in this culture. I think men and women have different kinds of pressure. And I should say, I think generally speaking, women's lives are harder. I just want to say that as a dude. However, there's status. That's pretty hard.
Mhm.
Status, money, certain things that you kind of should be getting figured out.
Mm.
And if you don't have that, you're not alone. There are other people. You could feel really alone when the majority of the people around you are married, divorced, second husband or wife, kids. They're now the vice president, sold a company. I came from an upper middle class background.
Mhm.
There's some success going on. My
Mhm.
stepbrothers, who are a year older than me, are multimillionaires.
Mhm.
My sister and my brother-in-law, they live in Great Neck. Very nice place. Got a beautiful daughter. Not my life. That's okay. But there's a reference points to a degree. I know people will say, don't compare. Stop. You're going to compare some. You're human. And it's tricky.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of a rant, but just sort of thought back to that. And one thing that we don't, I think, talk too much about is
I
that
agree with
stuff around
that.
status and expectation, and it takes a toll. It does.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We have milestones, whether it's a birthday or a holiday, and we do this process of taking stock, and that's something that at times has hit me very hard.
Yeah. You can have the attitude, well, it's going to be better, or you can have the attitude of it might be the same. Can I be okay with that? And I haven't figured that out for me yet.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is.
Well, thank you for being so vulnerable and real. It's
Oh.
refreshing and
Always.
courageous.
Thank you for having me on and having great guests and asking good questions and holding space and having Gary as a great boss. We all appreciate him.
Thank you, Gary. And you're welcome for the t-shirt.
I haven't seen it, but I believe you that I'll have it, but and then I will formally thank you, but a pre-sale or pre-sending thank you to you both.
All right. Well, I think you're awesome, Sean, and I'm looking
Thank you.
forward to your event on the 11th. I'm so glad that we get to partner together here and there. And yeah, you're so much talent and just a good
Appreciate you.
heart. So keep doing what you're doing.
Likewise.
Okay.
Keep doing what you're doing.
All right. If you're out there feeling alone, please give us a call at Nami. We'd like to help you find that space that you're looking for, whether it's with us or maybe with another group. We'd like to just be there with you for part of your journey, because we've been there and we know what it's like. So please don't feel alone. We want to hear from you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Bye, y'all.
Bye.